looking for home. Foundling, looking for home. Wanders through darkness and travels alone. Foundling, looking for home. Wanders through darkness and travels alone.
So I told you I was going to make a documentary about adoption, about the experiences of birth mothers. And so over the last few weeks, I've gone out and got in contact with several women that had given up babies, and told them my story, and they agreed to meet with me. And as of I think last week, I've interviewed 3 or 4 of these women already. Women who gave up their children. I also got in touch with a bunch of adoption agencies, and had a nice conversation with the clinical directors at one of these agencies. And I explained that I'm making a film about the experiences of birth mothers, and they agreed to talk to me about it. And so last Friday, I went down there and met with them to talk about having them participate in the film. And they know my story, so I'm very open about, I was adopted. In fact, I was adopted through Louise Wise. Well, so they get me there, and she tells me in advance, says, we have clinic day that day, you'll meet the people, and, we have the babies come in, and, and they're there, right? They're there.
What is clinic day?
So clinic day is the mothers, these caregivers, right? Bringing the babies to there to get, not picking them up, bringing them there, okay, to see the pediatrician.
I see, okay, very good.
So,
okay.
you got it, right? You got the
yes,
fucking
yes,
visual?
yes.
So I'm walking around the place. Well, first I'm sitting in the reception area and I'm thinking, what the fuck am I doing? Like really, like I'm laughing to myself because it's like, it's like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I mean, am I out of my mind? Is there any real reason that I need to be doing this to myself? Because I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not upset. I'm not like, oh my God, I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm this and that. I'm just like, but I know I'm in for something.
Foundling.
Not one day in my life ever went by that I didn't think about him. But I felt that I had done what was best for him.
And I used to say this, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, at least I have a chance to go to heaven because of this act that I did, this sacrifice that I did for total strangers. And there are people in this world that have everything they want because of what I did for them.
I was at a concert and I fell on the escalator and I got really hurt. I hurt my back, I pinched a nerve, and I pulled a ligament. So the next day I had to go to the ER. And I was in the ER and they told me I was pregnant. But it turns out that I was 5 months pregnant. So, and I didn't know, I didn't get any morning sickness. I really had an unregular period my whole life. So it was a pretty big shock.
The thing about social workers is that we're dealing with the combination of biological issues, psychological issues, emotional issues, and social issues. One of the big social work things is something called a biopsychosocial assessment. So we do focus on the whole person in their environment.
And I didn't really have a normal high school because I was radical. I marched with Martin Luther King. I demonstrated. I was a member of corps. I worked in theater. So I wasn't your like perky little high school student that went to proms and dances. I went down and went to the coffee shops and listened to Bob Dylan and all those people.
I had a boyfriend that I started seeing when I was 16. And he was my boyfriend, and actually during my final year of high school, I even lived at his house.
I was 15 and a half, and Daddy was 18 and a half.
Where? How'd you meet?
At a Sweet 16 party.
In Brownsville, rabbi's daughter.
My parents were going through a very messy divorce, and I was always I always got good grades. I was always the one they didn't have to worry about. So that's how it was. And I finished high school. I got a partial scholarship from New York State for my SAT scores. And I applied to colleges, and I couldn't wait to go. Couldn't wait. Because my family life was such a mess. It was like we didn't have a family.
I was in no position to have a baby. I'm not really working. I lived at home with my parents. I'm 22 years old. And I just wasn't ready for it.
They were really instructed to do is to tell your child as soon as possible, as soon as they were old enough to understand, to never make it like a big deal. Just always tell your kid that that they were adopted. Like, I don't remember the event or the day or sitting down and telling me or anything like that.
So I was working at this law firm, and right after Christmas in 87, 87, the lawyer, whose name was on the door, said, "Oh, I realized I didn't get you anything for Christmas. I'll take you out for lunch. You want to go out for lunch next week?"
Okay.
Thinking, oh God, what am I going to do with lunch with this guy? He's old, and I'm 19, 18, and that was the beginning.
First date I took her to New York, and then after that I figured my obligation was over. I didn't have to take her to the city anymore.
And one lunch was actually really nice. I was really thrilled. Cool, fancy French restaurant, wine, yay. So he said, "Oh, this is fun, we should do it again." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go eat that good food again."
We went to the New York Paramount.
And we saw the Lemon Drop Kids with Bob Hope, and Johnny Ray was on the stage. Because the Paramount had live stage shows at the time. And then we just started to date, on and off.
No, you didn't want to go steady, so we saw each other every other week, not every week.
Okay.
And then it was, "Oh, what time are you leaving? You want to go get a drink?" I read Cosmo. This was, what you were supposed to do. "Oh, really? Okay. My boss is taking me out for a drink? Okay, sure." Thinking, nah, really?
I have a head for business and a bod for sin.
I have black hair up to here, and I wear eyeliner and weird shoes, and you don't want it, really. Okay, but whatever. I'll go for it, because I was really at that point in time where I was into checking things out, living, and having these experiences. So yeah, I'm gonna go out with my boss. Okay? Well, it turned into an affair, which I was just like, oh, what the hell?
And we've continued that in over 50 years that we've been married. We see each other every other week.
No, then you went into the Army. I still have the letters. I have them in a box, tied up.
Because I lied like a champ.
I mean, there's always a lot of questions around. As much as they told me that I was adopted, they didn't tell me the whole story. In fact, they made up, a bunch of things about it. They said my mother had died, during childbirth. That wasn't true, and I always knew that. I was always suspicious about the story that they told me.
Came to NYU when I was 17, just turned 17, and I got pregnant. At the time, nothing was legal. There were no resources to do anything with, so I just kind of basically ignored it and chose to hide it to my parents, just because I didn't want to disappoint them.
I was dating my boss, even though he was 25 years older than me. People do that. I had never done that before, but it was fun. Except that I got pregnant.
I came home, saw the boyfriend that I'd been seeing since I was 16. We had broken up. I broke up with him maybe 5 months prior to that. And I saw him one night, and I got pregnant. And I know what day it was. It was Friday the 13th.
So she comes and she takes me for a tour, walking around the place, and then I get into this room. And it's a room full of infants. It's a room full of infants. Who were given up. Infants, like little babies.
And, you know, at the moment, you know, right then and there, you know, at the moment, right then and there, you know, I didn't really feel anything, you know, I was just like fucking disoriented. Like, not like, you know, like, not even like, not like, oh my God, the blood's right out of my face, or...
I knew early, and you know, my intention was just, I was going to tell him that it was going to be okay. And I couldn't do it. Didn't do it. Froze every time, beat myself up every time, and meanwhile, just getting more and more pregnant.
And I went and told my boyfriend, because we were back together. I had never imagined us marrying. You know, he was young. He cheated on me all the time. You know, it wasn't a good relationship. And so I even knew that day being with him would not be an option. I was hoping, I guess, that he would turn around and be this stand-up guy, but he, you know, he wasn't.
Well, my parents, they couldn't be more excited. They were ecstatic. My mom flat out told me that she's glad that I found out when I did, so that abortion wasn't an option, because that's definitely the road I would have gone down. So it took me a while to tell my boyfriend, because how do you tell somebody that their whole life as they know it is over?
Expanding the waist, you know, buying cardigan sweaters that buttoned and, you know, kept everything nice and straight and stuck in my stomach, and went to work every day. And there was 2 other pregnant women in the office. And they'd be like, oh, can you get that for me? And I'd be like bending down and fetching their stuff. Meanwhile, I'm like just as pregnant as them. And I'm like working with him and hiding this. I didn't tell my best friend. I didn't speak a word of it to anybody.
When I told him, he accused me of sleeping with other people, which just didn't happen. That wasn't me.
Well, I was heavy. I've always been heavy.
Okay.
And so basically I lost 22 pounds when I was pregnant, but everyone just thought I was getting a bigger stomach. Plus, he was small when he was born. He was only 4 pounds, so I wasn't huge, but nobody knew, no.
Our clients have a tendency to want to avoid dealing with that. There is a problem, it's difficult, and they don't necessarily just say, okay, I'm going to solve this problem. They say, oh my God, you know, I can't possibly deal with this problem. I'm not going to deal with this problem.
I couldn't believe what was happening. It was almost like I shut off. Like I wasn't scared, I wasn't surprised, I was just like, they were saying it to me and I was like, okay, like no thoughts, nothing. Just wanted to get home, wanted to get in bed, almost like if I hadn't been told, it would have still never happened. I still wouldn't be pregnant.
Daddy was away on a trip and you were watching Dragnet up in your room.
The story you were about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
And there was a baby that was abandoned and put in the program and thrown in a trash can. And you asked me if you had been abandoned.
I thought in my warped mind that if you thought that maybe you weren't given up for adoption and that your mother maybe died in childbirth, that it would be a lot easier.
Somehow I got the idea that this was something that I was not supposed to talk about. If I would bring it up, and certainly bring it up outside of the home, they would seem to get upset, or at least that was my interpretation. My interpretation is that they would get upset if I, just went around and told everybody that I was adopted.
There was no sex education in those days.
What is it, dear?
I know that the baby goes inside you. That's where Johnny was. But he seems so big. What I wonder is, how does he get out of there? Your belly button?
You had sex, but you didn't know. I didn't know anything about having a baby. And like I said, I never went to the doctor. So when my water broke, I didn't even know what that was. I was washing dishes in my kitchen, my water broke, and I freaked out because I didn't know what was happening.
A lot of times people don't ask women if they're pregnant because what if they aren't pregnant? What if they are just gaining weight? That's an awful thing to bring up. So people avoid asking the question. So it becomes a little don't ask, don't tell in families sometimes. And everybody's in denial.
I saw my parents 2 weeks before I delivered him. I was standing in their kitchen. My mother was saying, oh, you're gaining weight. What is it, a boy or a girl? She was joking. They didn't find out until I went to the hospital.
And somewhere along the way began these internal conversations that I would have with this baby. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to tell him because you just really can't be there, and we can't do this, this is bad. And it just kept on going. And I just never did. I got pregnant in early February. And it was not until late June that finally Marina, the woman who was the office manager, who was like my surrogate grandmother, took me aside one evening, and she was Colombian, so she had this very heavy Colombian accent. She said, Claudia, I still hear her, Claudia, are you pregnant? Do you think? And I went, no. I mean, so here it is, finally someone confronting me, and I totally denied the whole thing, convinced her that I was not pregnant, that everything was fine, there was not an issue, leave me alone. Did nothing.
You know, sitting in that group, right, and one woman talked about giving a baby up for adoption. That was really my only, up until the last 2 weeks, my only experience with, you know, with birth mothers. I swear I cried for 3 days. You know? The last week.
Since going?
Yeah. I've been on another planet, like I'm disoriented. Like a little removed, like that initial feeling like hadn't quite gone away.
3 weeks later, I just start crying hysterically. I'm at his house, and we wake up one morning, I just start crying. I go out of my bag, I grab the sonogram pictures, and I tell him. He's like, okay, we're gonna handle this, we're gonna take care of it, like, we're going to the doctor. I'm like, no, you don't understand, like, I'm about 6 months along now. I have to have this baby.
Of course, he wanted me to have an abortion. And we argued about it, and I wouldn't do it. And he called right in front of me and made an appointment that, of course, I never went to. He wanted me to have an abortion a week because it was cheaper. I still remember these conversations going on, and I wouldn't.
It kind of sunk in for him, and he got really angry at me. He was like really upset. How could I have not known? How could I let this happen? A few days later, a week later, I went over his house and we sat down with his parents. And he brought up adoption, so then I got really upset with him. I couldn't imagine giving away a baby. I thought it was just a horrible, heartless thing to do. I was terrified, but I always had it in my mind that I was going to keep the baby. I never thought of adoption. Nobody I know is adopted. My whole family is right off the boat from Poland. They are extremely traditional. They barely speak English. Nothing like that happens in their culture where they're from.
We were so young that we wanted to work, and we said
put
we'd
together some
wait
money,
like
we'd
2
wait.
years before we would,
Even
try to have a baby.
And then subsequently in those 2 years and such, a lot of some of our friends who had gotten married before us were starting to have kids. So then we decided we wanted to try to have kids.
She courted me again, and she was like, Claudia, you're pregnant. I know you are. What are you going to do? And at that point, it was just like the jig was up, and I was like, yeah, I am. And it was like such relief to finally have someone say, I know what you're doing, you're a mess, we're gonna take care of this. And I was like, I just gave up control to her.
I knew I wouldn't have an abortion. I've gone with friends, brought them to places to have abortions. That's what people did. And I just wouldn't do that. I just felt like it was my baby. It was my baby, and I had no illusions about the father. I didn't think it would be some way to make him all of a sudden turn into this great boyfriend who was going to prove his love to me or anything.
I hadn't known I was pregnant, so I was out, I was drinking, I was partying, I had used drugs recreationally, so I was terrified for the baby. Immediately went and did a whole bunch of genetic testing, did a whole bunch of drug testing, blood testing.
It must have been like after, trying probably for a good 9 months that I went to the first gynecologist, and they started doing tests.
Then after that, had my first gynecological appointment, and the next day went to see a nutritionist, and the next day went to see this person, just doctors.
She did exactly what I kind of feared, which was, you're gonna go to this clinic. And I went to a fancy clinic on Fifth Avenue, and they looked at me, and they went, yeah, no, you can't be at this clinic, you need to go to this other clinic. Because you're way too far along from New York, so we're gonna send you to that one. I went to the other clinic, and calling her, okay, they say it's gonna be $700. She sends the messenger over with $700 in cash. They're gonna do a sonogram. Okay. Okay, I'm going for termination at this point. Whether I want to, don't want to, there's no thought in this. It's just swimming wherever they tell you to swim.
They blow the tubes to see if there's anything blocking the tubes. I was in the hospital and had another procedure done.
And if there were any abnormalities, and I used to have to go ejaculate and run with it to see if it was good or bad or indifferent.
And they never.
And the last doctor that we decided, because I figured it's, we're running and it's going crazy. The last doctor told us stories that, gee, okay, God only knows.
So I went back and I told her. And she was like, well, okay, I'm going to send you to my doctor. And this is the third place now that I'm being sent to. And this doctor, I explained the whole thing to him, and he still felt my belly and checked everything out and said, no, you can't. You're done in New York. You are going to have a baby.
My parents are so excited this whole time. They're planning how we're going to set up a nursery, what kind of furniture we're going to buy, this and that. And in my head the whole time, all I can do is accept this because I have no option. So I'm going along with all this. My mom is talking about planning a baby shower.
I would wait to see if I get my period and then didn't get my period.
It was much more difficult for her.
Emotionally?
I was disappointed, but she was going through most of all of the testing and everything. And yeah, it was very
And then finding
difficult.
out this one's pregnant, that one's pregnant, and why can't I become pregnant?
We'll send you to Kansas. Because in Kansas, it was legal up to 26 weeks. Now, she is ready to this point because she's like, you cannot have a baby. The baby will ruin your life. And I actually did talk to the people out in Kansas about the whole procedure and what they do. And at this point in time, I am 6 months pregnant. He's moving. I feel it.
I always knew there was something different about me. I'd never seen my mother pregnant. There were certainly enough opportunities for it to come up where you didn't have the same set of experiences.
No. And I remember talking to Kansas and getting off the phone with her, and she's ready to help me lie to my mother, fork over $3,000, have me in debt for her ever just to have this abortion so I don't have this baby, because it's the worst thing in the whole entire world, and I will destroy myself. I will destroy my life if I have this baby. Gotta get rid of it no matter what I do. And I was like, no, I'm not going to Kansas.
When I found myself in that spot, I knew right away I couldn't do that. I just felt like this was a person. This was my child who was here. And that was it.
As much as even when I was panicked and not telling a soul and not talking about it, and it was my little secret. And there was a constant dialogue, in my head where I would talk to this baby.
My emotions and the idea that I had of what was going to happen with all this was like snowballing, and it was all being fueled by my family and the fact that I had to accept this, that there was nothing I can do with it. Seeing how he was reacting almost like snapped me back into reality. So I didn't even bring it up to him because I realized how ridiculous all of it was and how I should be so much more upset. That's not how I should be thinking about the whole situation.
For me, it was devastating. I'm an only child. I always wanted siblings. I couldn't understand why I never had siblings. And I wanted to be a mother. I wanted to have a child.
Then what are you going to do? And boom, out of the air, I plucked it and said, well, I'll just go and have a baby and give him up for adoption. That was the answer.
The whole experience, I can empathize with the sadness and the hurt and the broken lives and the whole thing, but the whole lack of any accountability and taking any sort of responsibility is just, it enrages me. It just fucking enrages me. These adoption agencies, who run it, and they're like, well, it's it's the right thing and family. These women think that, babies were stolen. If you read the stuff that was written, especially about the 60s and 70s, babies were stolen by adoption agencies. But what the fuck, man? In some way, I hate every single person that I've met. I can empathize. I can feel bad on some level, but I do fucking hate them all. I fucking hate them all. The adoptive parents, it's like, well, you know what? Look. Nature didn't make it so that you could have a baby. Maybe you should listen to that.
and they would sell, and they had books, and I've read this stuff online, and they, oh, we're this and we're that. What does any of that, really, what does any of that mean? What does any of that fucking mean? So I hate them all. I just fucking, I just fucking hate them all. Because at the end of the day, they all have their rationalization. They all have their reasons. And there's a baby. Me. That. Sitting in a room someplace.
I didn't know what I was going to do. I really didn't. I had no idea. No one, even after they knew, no one said, you can stay with me. It will be all right. I will help you. No one said that. It was left up to me. And I just thought adoption, where people can't have children, how terrible for them. And here I went and got myself pregnant, which was shameful.
I want to say it was like Catholic Charities in New York, and speaking to someone there, and I did not like her. She was just very kind of cold and had this like stern nun visual from her voice, and I didn't like them. And then I know I talked to a private lawyer who was based out of California. And I believe I spoke to them actually after I told my mother, because I was seeing a therapist at the time who lied to the therapist too. I was such a lousy patient.
In anticipation of our having a baby, we moved from the 3rd floor walk-up to 647 Albany Avenue, and we took a 2-bedroom apartment. And in the building, we became friends with a couple who had an adopted little baby.
Went back to the Yellow Pages and saw my agency, whose name was Adoptions with Love. And I thought, what a nice name! And so I called them. And the minute I called them, they were just exactly what I was looking for.
I thought it was horrible. I thought, because my idea was that the baby lives in an adoption agency. Like, I always thought, like, foster homes, adoption agencies are overflowing with children, that he's gonna live there, he's gonna have a horrible life, it's gonna be low, he's not gonna have any money, it's gonna be overcrowded. I thought it was gonna be a horrible situation.
Our goal again is to make a good plan for the woman and her baby.
And once the whole adoption thing we got on that path, it was almost like a relief. It was like, wow, like I don't have to be a mom. Like I don't have to be a mom at 22.
And we're very happy if she makes a good plan that involves her being able to parent the baby.
I wasn't ready to grow up. I was not an adult. And I didn't feel I could be responsible for a little child. I was 17 years old in New York in the 60s.
So back in the 60s, it was unheard of for a single woman, particularly a single young woman, to get pregnant out of wedlock and decide that they're going to parent alone.
The fact is that she was older, she had been married, and I guess she wanted to get married again, and maybe she thought it might have been a little more difficult to get remarried if she had an infant. Maybe. So I don't think she was coerced. I think she did this because she felt that she might not have been able on her own to take care of a child.
They had a social worker talk to me at Spence Chapin, but I don't recollect a lot of what she said. But I don't think she ever gave me an option of not doing it, or ever said, do you want to?
The social stigma against that was enormous, and so there were all kinds of pressures. And so, the social workers came from society. It wasn't that it was the agenda of social work or the agenda of the adoption agency, but they were part of that milieu that said that, it's not good for a child to grow up with a single parent. It's not good for a child to grow up with the stigma of being a bastard.
I want to know what happened. I want to know the story. I want to know the truth. And now I know for a fact I wasn't told the truth. I wasn't told the truth. My parents weren't told the truth by the agency and the people involved. There were a lot of lies. It was completely, an opaque process. And look, at the end of the day, There are a lot of people out there who probably wanted to look, who did want to look, and because the information wasn't available or just completely misrepresented, couldn't find. And so I'd want to know the truth.
Well, they want your baby. They're there to facilitate the progress. And I mean, you know, there are some agencies and some people that are better than others. I mean, I've heard horror stories. I was in a Catholic hospital, and I can tell you I was not treated with respect because I was an unwed teenager in a Catholic hospital. And the attitude of society was, you know, totally negative at that point. They never gave me a suggestion about, oh, maybe you want to. They weren't there for us.
60% of our clients end up making a plan to parent the baby, either alone or with the help of their family.
Most of how they treated people at the time was definitely a form of subtle coercion.
A lot of people are surprised by that. They think adoption agencies are all about getting the baby, and that's not our goal.
I know that if I had decided to keep him and not relinquish, it would have been fine. My parents would have accepted it, we would have worked it out.
I called the agency and they gave us an appointment, and you go to a group meeting with all prospective adoptive parents. And they tell you right at the meeting, there were 20 couples there, more than 20 couples, that maybe 2 out of the 20 will eventually get a baby.
I started looking into it. I started looking at adoption families online, primarily, to do it like myself. And I realized that there's so much demand, so many amazing families out there that can't have children of their own, that it's actually almost extremely competitive.
We also wanted to say thank you for considering us as prospective parents to this miracle that you're bringing into the world. We wouldn't be able to be parents without someone like you. So thank you. It's a tremendous gift that you're giving to one very lucky couple.
The truth was that both of us are college educated, white, young, extremely fit, like one of our babies in such high demand.
Oh my God, I said, when we walked out of there, I said, look at all these people. There are a lot of professional people there. We were just, young working class people. And I said, what are our chances?
That was you.
What are our chances? And that made me even more nervous.
Oh yes, we understand. Of course, this is what we do. Oh no, we'll bring you here to Boston. Oh no, you'll live with another family. We kind of like have a foster situation, and oh yes, we'll take care of this. We give you, we have a special doctor arranged. You go to this hospital. They had it down, and it was exactly what this really just screwed up, lost, angry, confused 19-year-old needed.
With me was like something macho. What do you mean I can't have my own kid? So I wasn't that, into adoption. When we saw how the singers were handling it, I thought, look, he's no different than I am, and I'm no different than him, so I think I should really seriously consider it.
No one says mother if you're single. It's always unwed mother. Gotta have that qualifier in front of it. It's not a great thing to be single and pregnant and young. And I thought I can fix everything. And if I am the only one who gets hurt, it'll be all right because my child will have a perfect life. I'll make some poor infertile couple happy. What a gift I'll be giving.
It's paradoxical. On the one hand, you're in touch with this profound core emotion, and at the same time, you can resonate and empathize with the other side of what it is that is happening to these women, given, Greg, the cultural experience that they happen to be born into. This doesn't occur in Aboriginal society. It's a cultural phenomenon. And the Spence Chapin people, the mothers who give their children up for adoption, the interim mothers, everyone who is in that category that you hate because you are tapping into this profound core experience, they are all part of a cultural phenomenon called getting pregnant and giving my child up for adoption, called interim mothers, called finding your birth mother, called finding your child that you haven't had, called Oprah.
There's hundreds and hundreds of families. And it just became so overwhelming. I mean, it got to the point where I wouldn't even know what to look for.
Most adoptions happen through profiling now, which means that adoptive families put together a profile. It could be one page, it could be an album.
I needed counseling, so we decided to do it through Spence Chapin because they had offices really close to my house on Long Island.
In our agency, the way it works is they put together a one-page profile, which is a picture, a letter, and some information about themselves that goes into a book of all the families, all the adoptive families who are waiting. And then they have a bigger profile, which is a big photo album for the next step.
I said to my boyfriend that I would like to look into going through the agency.
The birth mother will look through all of these profiles and choose several families. She'll narrow it down to the families that interest her, that she feels connected to.
They had tons of families in their database, tons of family books to show me.
After that, she will look at their larger albums to narrow it down to the one family.
Just like a therapist does. Ask you about your childhood, how you grew up, why do you want to have a child? What would you do if you were refused?
I literally imagined us living in the projects, my child being barefoot, and me always having to ask for handouts.
I said I would go further. I would.
I told him
if I want a child badly enough,
we'll go get it where we have to.
If we have to go black market, we'll go black market.
I met the lawyer and he showed me a picture of them. I continued, of course, to see the obstetrician until one day the lawyer called and said that the adoptive parents wanted me to go see a different doctor in a different city because they wanted me to deliver in a particular hospital. And I said, okay. And I remember telling my obstetrician this, and he was very concerned. He said, you can go wherever you want.
There was a lot back then where there was a lot of problems with black market adoptions.
For working people,
it could have been $20,000, $30,000.
No, maybe it was a lot less then, but it could have been 10 or 15 then,
and you didn't know anything. Who your mother was, who your biological mother, if there was a biological father.
What did they get all their shots? Were they healthy?
And so I had this connection to my child, but you also begin to separate yourself. And they wanted me to go to another doctor. Okay, I went to another doctor.
They do a home visit.
To see if you got the extra room, because
they go through the apartments.
Before they say that you're approved.
No.
Yeah. Yes.
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 I don't know if it was before they said we're approved.
Yes, Harvey, it was.
Or that would be one of the defining factors.
They couldn't make
that we had a room and set up.
They had to see where the baby was going to be before they were going to say they can give you a baby.
When I said to my mother, I told her I was pregnant, the first thing she said to me was, I can't take care of this baby. I can't help you raise this baby. I said, I know, don't worry, you're not going to have to. I'm going to have this baby and place this baby for adoption.
I told my parents that this is the way we were going to go, and they were in complete denial. Kept picking up baby furniture, kept talking about how the nursery is going to look, and I almost let them be in denial.
She started out kind of like, okay, well, that's a good idea, but then you could tell it was spinning. It immediately became, well, nobody can know. I mean, so literally, even though this was 87, nobody will know. You can't work there anymore. Well, I can't just leave. I have to at least put in 2 weeks' notice. So we made up this big elaborate thing at my office about how I had to quit because I had to go. I was accepted in some school at Boston, and I had to get ready to go to school.
A lot of women, especially in the 60s, were forced into relinquishing. A lot of the women on my group were sent out to aunt and uncles, and told if you bring the baby home, we will disown you or you can't. I mean, forced. I don't have that because I wasn't forced to do it.
They had a home on Staten Island for the unwed mothers, and they wanted to keep them at least 3 months so they knew the kids were healthy. It gave them shots, and wanted the mothers to have the time in case they had changed their minds. Years later, when my cousin adopted, they went to the hospital, and as soon as the woman gave birth, they brought the baby right to them. It was a newborn, so they were able to tell, but we weren't going to get a newborn.
They didn't give newborns.
So many girls were sent away, and there was a great amount of birth moms from the 60s, late 60s, because of the whole sexual revolution. So I'm fortunate in the fact that I didn't have that negativity from my parents. I didn't have that, I had support.
My brother was 6 at the time, and he would go to camp. So during the day, he was at school, and it would be okay. My mother was working, and I'd have the house, and I'd just paddle around and do my thing. But then my brother's bus would get there at 3:30, and my grandfather would come over to watch my brother until my mother got home. And my grandfather couldn't know. So I had to hide from my grandfather. So for 2 hours, 3 hours every night, because sometimes he stayed for dinner. That was great. And I would just have to sit on my bed or lay on my bed and not, get up to pee, not, do anything, because my grandfather had to think that I was still working. So I was, not supposed to be there. And I literally had to hide.
I didn't want to do it, but I thought it was what I needed to do. I was going to be separated from my son. I still remember lying there. Before I was even showing, I would sleep on my stomach and hold my hand, right here, before I was showing, just so I could feel him. And I would feel his little limbs move across my hand. And I would do that until I really started showing and couldn't comfortably lie on my stomach anymore. But that was the one, that made me happy.
I had 9 months, and my wife had, 9 months to figure it out before the baby arrived. And still, after all of that, and knowing it's coming, you still freak out. I mean, I could just imagine how ill-prepared emotionally my parents were. They got a call on the phone, come pick up your kid.
I didn't feel good about what I was doing, no matter how many times I heard, you're so unselfish. Because, the flip side of that is that I would be selfish, and I kept him. It was really just like a nightmare. I don't know why I didn't say, because then it would have been about me. Keeping him. I didn't know how I was going to take care of him. How would that be fair? I can't try. I have to know I'm going to succeed.
I actually stayed with a couple that had adopted their baby through that agency. And that was part of the deal with the agency. That if you got a baby through the agency, they wanted to know if you'd be willing to be a foster family for another birth mother. And so I lived with this couple that was an adoptive couple and their adoptive daughter. So they were not the couple that I would relinquish to.
Most of these girls were teenagers. I think the youngest was 15. And we had one girl that was maybe 20 going into her senior year in college. And then one woman who was maybe 23, 24, older. Most of these girls were in the position, not because they were promiscuous. It was a situation that they were probably unprepared for. And I would say for the most part, many of them were very innocent.
They were lovely, lovely people. And it was funny because, I've had huge experience with babies. I'm 12 years older than my brother, I diapered him his whole life. I always babysat. I had all this great experience with babies. And so these were this brand new parents, and half the time they didn't even know what to do with this poor baby. So here it is, I'd be super pregnant and totally hanging out with the baby and taking care of the baby.
You've been approved, and we will let you know as soon as we have a baby available.
They asked if we wanted a choice.
Do you want a boy or a girl?
And I said I would take anything. And then she looked at me and I said, yeah, but I would prefer a boy first. but either one would be okay.
We said we would take either one. It didn't make a difference.
In the old days, the way it worked is the adoption agency would decide this is the right family for this baby. And what we found when it shifted, that birth parents make better decisions for their babies than social workers do.
I mean, my boyfriend and I had no idea. They were like, what kind of family are you looking for? And we didn't know.
I honestly did not care. All I wanted was a baby.
We wanted a couple. We wanted a straight couple and a straight white couple. Because I thought that would be just the easiest, the best, at least for the child. But other than that, we had no idea. How do you pick one family from another family, people you don't even know?
And then it's the anxiety of waiting.
Until you get the call and come down and look at the baby.
And then we went, and once we knew we were approved, we went and we picked out a crib and a carriage and a dressing table and, told them just hold it.
We had set up an appointment where primarily I was going to go in and look at families.
When she called us to tell us that
they knew
already that they had a baby for us.
And the day we had the appointment is the day that I went into labor.
I remember everything about my 2 children being born. I remember the details. I remember when I went down to go get coffee and when I came back with Sienna, and I remember the spinal that Jill got and the guy and the doctor. I could probably pick the guy out again, But I remember every fucking detail. And the equivalent of birth for my mother, she didn't remember.
We got the call.
Who answered the phone?
Probably me.
Oh, you don't remember? You don't remember you don't remember getting the call?
No, I probably was at work.
Okay, no, but you don't remember?
Yes, I got the call and I called you at work to tell you.
What was the day?
November.
You don't remember the date?
And I just thought that was weird. I wasn't upset by it, and I'm not upset by it now, but I just think it's odd.
One little baby, 2 little mommies, 1 little sister and 1 little daddy, 1 little mirror and 1 little chair. We all have all the family.
You're thinking it's almost over, okay? I'm gonna give birth and then I can go back to my normal life, which is the reason why you're kind of doing this, so you can get back to normal. And then there's the complete conflicting aspect of it, which is I don't want this to be over. I don't want this pregnancy to end.
My water breaks, and I called my roommate. We had an apartment at the time on Bleecker Street. I called my roommate, and I said, I don't know what to do. And she was even more naive than me, and she was 2 years older because she was a sophomore. So she came home, so she looks in the phone book, and they have doctor's emergency service number. She calls up. So they send an ambulance to the apartment. And they transported me to Columbus Hospital because that was the closest. I don't know why they didn't bring me to St. Vincent, but whatever.
My mom was there with me. My boyfriend wasn't there. I didn't want him to be there. I mean, he threw up when my water broke. I just didn't want him to be there.
I think it was around 6:30, 7 o'clock. Brought me to the hospital, and thankfully the nice doctor was there. I remember the nurses coming in and one nurse leaving saying, oh, she could teach Lamaze. And I just wanted it to be natural. I just wanted it to be natural childbirth. And it was.
You were 4 months old, you were
So
born
that's
in
not
May.
November. Then you couldn't
June,
have
July, August, September. No, you weren't 6 months. You were 4.5 months old. November is when the adoption was legal. When we went to court, that was November, because that's when Kennedy was shot.
That's when we went to court with him.
Yes.
Yes.
When the adoption became legal, and that's the day Kennedy was shot.
Yeah.
It took a week before I went into labor, and I had him, and then he was small. He weighed 4.5 pounds at birth and dropped to 3.5. And so that he went to St. Vincent's Hospital for 3.5 weeks in the preemie ward to gain weight. There was nothing wrong with him. He had no medical problems. He was just tiny. I went to see him every day because I said I'm not going to sign the documents until I give him up.
He was very blue, and I remember saying over and over, is he okay? Is he okay? What's the matter? Because he didn't cry right away either. And they said he had some respiratory distress, and he ended up going into the care unit for a little while. They let me hold him for a little while, maybe a minute. I got to hold him, and it was just the greatest feeling. It was wonderful. I mean, I just given birth. It was amazing.
I held him immediately after birth, and then I proceeded to keep him with me for the next 48 hours that we were both in the hospital, where, I knew that would happen, and I wanted that to happen. I wanted to have my time with him. I guess it goes down to the fact that I had felt like I had screwed up so badly by getting pregnant, and then, the other things that had led up to it, I had no right to be in a relationship with this man. I had, dropped out of school. I had screwed up royally, and the adoption was the way that I was going to fix it. And I wanted to show everybody that I was going to fix it and make it all better.
Women and their partners who are pregnant cannot imagine what it will feel like once that baby's born. We raise it all the time. We bring it up. You're going to fall in love with this baby. It will be very difficult to separate from this baby.
They would say, it's going to be really hard. It's not going to be an easy thing, and a lot of women struggle with it. And no, I can do it.
There's a biological connection when when the baby is apart from you. You're going to feel it physically.
The truth is that the baby came out and he did not feel like mine. Like, I didn't feel so close to him that I wanted to hold him immediately, or that people can take him out of my... I didn't want to hold him, almost because I was falling asleep. I couldn't keep my eyes open at that point. I loved him, obviously, more than anything, but I just didn't feel like I was meant to have this child. But my parents were gushing over him, holding him, and it was really hard for me to watch, because I knew that we weren't keeping him.
I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I spent my time with him in the hospital. Total ton of pictures, hung out. I still have, the baby bunting that I bought especially for him to wear in the hospital that has now this gross stain on it from baby's throw up from 22 years ago that, you never wash it. I kept the bottle that he had in the hospital. I have the lock of hair. You did all these things knowing that this was it. This is all you have. You have 42 hours of time with your baby, and that's all you're going to get for the whole lifetime. So you better pack as much in as you possibly can and get everything that you can together out of it, because this is all you're going to have for the rest of your life.
The way it feels is fucked over. Some woman essentially spread her legs and left me with a pile of shit, okay? In my life, left me with a pile of shit.
He was 4 days old. So he came, and I just signed several papers. It was the worst day of my life. So, and they took my son from the hospital.
We got a phone call.
Yeah.
And that said we have a baby boy, and they gave us a date when you can come to see him. He will be at the agency on this and this date.
But in the hospital bed, it was only their lawyer there. Which, ideally it would have been my parents, someone looking out for me. Here I was, giving away my flesh and blood.
I think a lot of people will say when they hear about birth parents making an adoption plan, I don't know how anybody could do that. It's such a hard thing to imagine, and it's because of that. It's that, you're so connected to this baby. Babies are lovable, babies are beautiful, and this baby was actually created by this woman and is biologically connected to this woman and looks like her in some ways and feels like, so it's very, very hard.
The only person in this whole entire scenario who ever said to me, are you sure that you have to do this? Was Joan, the adoptive mother that I lived with.
My boyfriend and his family were all about adoption. My family was all about not adoption, keeping a baby. To the point that they were like, we will pay for an apartment. If you don't want to live at home, we'll pay for this. And I felt so overwhelmed, so much pressure. Like, I felt like everybody was just being nice to me and being supportive because they wanted me to do what they wanted me to do. And the second that I said differently to anybody, it's almost like they got so mad at me. I didn't feel like anybody was on my side.
And then I remember like being up that night really late, like, you know, trying to figure out exactly how to inscribe the book and what I should say and, you know, right, to send with him, you know, and having that all put together because the next day was the 72 hours and I was going to go sign the papers, which is another one of those, like, I have flashes, but there's not a consistent, like, memory of what happened. Like, I just remember it was a dark day.
I said, what do you think, what could I think of her if I'm here to get her baby? I feel sorry for her that she had to be forced into this, but I'm very happy that that's what she did.
That instead of having an abortion, that she gave us a chance to have a baby.
And I just remember them, you know, reading the paperwork over and over again, which, you know, I had seen before, the relinquishment papers. But I just remember just like, I hated them. I hated that. I hated it so much. And all they kept saying, like everything said like, you know, you're terminating forever and ever. And, you know, you're getting rid of, and you're abandoning your parental rights forever and ever. And this child will no longer be yours. And it was like, you know, like in a movie where you just hear the words echoing in your head. And it was just forever and ever and nevermore and forever and ever again and in the rest of your life and forever and ever. And it was just like, oh my God, just shut up, let me sign it and get the hell out of here.
I sit them down and I start telling them that this is what's gonna happen. We're giving the baby for adoption. There's no second guessing this. This is what's happening. And they freak out. My parents freak out. My dad leaves, like storms out, and my mom just becomes hysterical. And she's holding the baby now. Becomes hysterical. Says she will not leave. Says she's refusing to leave. And a nurse just happens to come in to take away my food or whatever, and she hears all this going on, and she says like, Agatha, like, and she goes to me, she goes, Mom, do you need me to get her out of the room? And I was like, wow, like I'm the mom. Like it was such a weird thing to hear. And I didn't want to say yes, but like my mom was hysterical, refusing to leave, had the baby in her hands. It was really a horrible situation.
Me and my roommate picked him up at the hospital. He was released to me because I was still his mother. And I went in a cab from St. Vincent's up to East 94th Street to bring him to the adoption agency to relinquish him. And my parents were there. My aunt was there, which I didn't even remember. You know, and I remember the worst thing I felt so bad for my mother because she held her first grandson and cried, and I felt so bad for her more than me. That's what makes me think I held my feelings at check, you know, and it was very, very difficult, and I never quit thinking about him. Not one day in my life ever went by that I didn't think about him. But I felt that I had done what was best for him.
So we made an appointment for the following Monday or Tuesday, I think it was, to all of us would meet at the Spence Cheevan office here in Manhattan, and we would sign all the paperwork. And they had brought, I hadn't seen the baby, they had brought the baby, so me and my boyfriend went and like hung out with him for a little while they were doing all their side of the paperwork. And then we had brought the baby into a room where the adoptive family was, and we just took some pictures, we sat with them for a while, we cried, and we handed them over the baby.
You know that the clock's ticking and your time's running out and you only have a little bit more and you're just trying to pack it in there. And I just remember saying to him, like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to do. This is the only way this is gonna work. You'll be better. You don't want to be stuck with me. I'm a disaster. You know, you know, your father isn't around. I don't know what else to do, and I'm so sorry, but you'll be okay. You know, I love you, and this, you know, you'll be my baby, but you're just gonna have to go, and I'm sorry. You know, and there was a lot of repeating that until the very end, which then was truly just not good. I mean, I still to this day, I still don't know. I remember sitting with him because I was getting released from the hospital, and that was the end of the path. I got released, he stayed on, and then it was over. And so I was getting picked up from the hospital, and whatever his name was, Ken was there to pick me up, and my bags were packed and everything, and I had just a few minutes left with, and I just remember thinking and them going, okay, well, are you ready? And no, I'm not ready. And I can be still in the chair, and I can physically remember being there. And what I still can't physically even comprehend is I know I got up, and I know that I physically walked over to the bassinet. And I can see the bassinet was one of those clear-sided ones. And I know I physically put him down in the bassinet. And I know there was a nurse there that was kind of itching to go. I remember being annoyed with her. Like, listen, woman, this is my last few minutes. Like, knock it off. You can give me a few minutes here. And then just having to, I think I turned away. I think I turned away because I just couldn't watch him go. But I remember the door closing.
When I was 13, I remember saying something like I feel like I have something to uncover, something to remember, something that I'm not aware of, like some big mystery. And this is it.
It is such a spiritual place that you're hitting, that you're reaching. The connection of the baby to his mother and the breaking of that at that spiritual level. It's really, really, really profound.
I knew this is what was going to happen when I started on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I know.
I mean, I knew it.
I know. It's what you were seeking, Greg.
He was born loving me. I may not have been able to take him on vacation every year. Wasn't doomed to live in the projects because I was a teen mother. I had goals. I know it. Yeah, I do. I think it was a mistake.
I would have loved this baby more than anybody in the world, but this baby just couldn't have the life with me that it could have had with people that were older, people that wanted a child.
Why didn't she change her mind, right? Like, why, when you're there, in the moment when you're there and the baby comes out, it's like, all right, as bad as it is, I love this infant so much. Why didn't she keep it? What was wrong? If I was good enough, if I was that special, she would have kept me.
There's a lot of sadness and regret in that, especially the fact that I couldn't have any more kids. I mean, there was no reason for it, but that I never did have another natural child, that he was my only child. And it would have worked. I mean, yeah, I would have grown up. You grow up, 17, you eventually grow up.
I wouldn't have wanted this baby. I would have resented it if I had kept it. But these people are ready for a child. They had money, they had an established family, they had a home of their own. They had opportunities for this baby that I could have never, ever given him.
In retrospect, I mean, when you look at something at 40 or 30, it's totally different. You don't even think about the things at 17 that the future's going to bring.
I think that the agency gave the mothers enough time to make, and that's why babies were in foster care, so they could make their decisions.
There are those times when you are up in the middle of the night and you are alone and you just can't even stop crying. I don't know that there is any other pain in the world like this.
I think back to that time, it was just like a nightmare. I was a mother without her child, and I still cried myself to sleep every night, and you just feel like a shell. No one talks to you about it. You just did this amazing thing.
They talk about how parenting is really that hard, and are you going to be ready to give up sleepless nights, and are you going to be ready to give up this, and are you ready to do that? Once you're a mother, those things happen anyway. I mean, I had sleepless nights where I was up all night. I wasn't up all night with a baby. I was up all night with the pain.
I wasn't a good enough parent for my own child. I mean, you don't consciously, I guess, think of these things, but yeah, it colored my whole life. The choices I made afterwards, I mean, my husband is wonderful, and thank God I have him. But the way I was going, I easily could have ended up with someone different.
I can't imagine becoming the best parent that I could possibly one day be if I was thrown into it now. I don't know what would have happened. I mean, maybe I could have been the best mom possible, but I don't think so, and I wasn't willing to take that risk. And I realized that no matter how hard it is for me, no matter how hard it is on my family, the biggest thing is this baby and the best life that we can give him.
It always took a part of me, but it was emotion that I knew was necessary. It was, like I said, I accepted the decision, so I dealt with the emotion. I didn't keep it hidden. I think that's important, because when you keep that stuff inside and you don't express it, and the fact that I talked to people my whole life, all my friends, everybody knew about my son. Everyone knew how I felt. Everyone knew I was going to look for him. Everyone knew his birth name. And that helps. The more you deal with something that could be an emotional burden for you, the better you can deal with it. It's when you hold it inside that it eats you up. And that, but if you can talk about it, you can put it in its place where, you still have the feelings. I still have pain from giving him up. I'll always have that. But I understand it and I accept it.
As much as I really, I hate the woman who gave me. But on the other hand, and I believe this just as much, it's like she's always thought about me, it's never gone away, and in some way, that there's been this guardian angel, that there's been somebody, that I've been the recipient of that energy too. Yes. Like there's someone out there who, is thinking and hoping that, everything's okay and that it all worked out, and, sort of
connected to you.
Yeah.
Profound.
There's always going to be a part of you missing. There's a natural bond between parent and child that no matter what you do is always going to be there. And that can't go away whether you're separated or not.
I think that about her, I think that, does she think about you, what you look like, what you're doing, how you turned out, what kind of parents were you brought up with? I do. And I think it's only natural to.
And I used to say this, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, at least I have a chance to go to heaven because of this act that I did, this sacrifice that I did for total strangers. And there are people in this world that have everything they want because of what I did for them. And that's the kind of stuff that, when you're home at night and you're alone and it hurts, you tell yourself that to make yourself feel better.
And I want him to know always that I love him even now more than I've ever loved anybody. That he didn't come from a place that didn't want him. He came from a place that loved him so much that was willing to give him away. I think about it and I get angry with my parents. I think about how selfish they were. They tried to pressure me into having a baby that I didn't want. Not that I didn't want it, but that I couldn't have. They weren't thinking about the baby. They were thinking about themselves. They were thinking about what they wanted, even though I know what I did was best.
I wish that the world understood birth parents better and understood that sometimes it's the best decision that they could make for their child, and just the fact that they made it for their child does not mean that they stop loving their child, stop thinking about their child. These are women who may not have told anybody in their life because of the fear of the judgment that they'll experience. Some of these women, it's been 40 or 50 years, sometimes longer, since they placed their child for adoption, and they still feel with the greatest intensity that grief and that loss.
Every night I sent him my love. And this sounds silly, but every time I saw the first star, I would make a wish for him. I would just will my love to him that he knew, because that was the one thing I was so worried about, that he would think I didn't love him. It is always there. You do not forget. You know, it's just for me. You know, for me, that's how it was for me. It's something I wish I could have changed.
Now I don't have to tell you how slow the night can go. I know you've watched for the light, and I bet you could tell me how slowly 4 follows 3, and you're most forlorn just before dawn. So if you lose your faith, babe, you can have mine. And if you're lost, I'm right behind. 'Cause we walk the same line. When it's dark, baby, there's a light I'll shine. And if you're lost, I'm right behind. 'Cause we walk the same line. And I don't need reminding how loud the phone can ring when you're waiting for news. And that big old moon lights every corner of the room. Your back aches from lying, and your head aches from crying. So if you lose your faith, babe, you can have mine. And if you're lost, I'm right behind. 'Cause we walk the same line. When it's dark, baby, there's a light I'll shine. And if you're lost, I'm right behind. 'Cause we walk the same line. And if these troubles should vanish like rain at midday, well, I've no doubt there'll be more. And we can't run and we can't cheat, 'cause baby, when we meet what we're afraid of, we find out what